Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Expert Chat. My name is Trinia. I'm a team member here at Understood. And today we're going to be talking about homework and the various challenges that we might face in trying to get homework done, and also some of the solutions that maybe could work as we're encountering these issues. And we're super lucky to have Dr. Jerry Schultz joining us. Jerry is a clinical neuropsychologist. He is also a lecturer at Harvard Medical School. Jerry, do you want to take just a minute to introduce yourself, give a little more info to our viewers?
Sure, Trinia. Glad to be on again, too. I am, as Trinia said, a clinical neuropsychologist. I started out my professional career as a special education teacher. Probably my biggest claim to fame in terms of dealing with homework is the fact that I have two now grown daughters who have 5 kids between them, and I get to watch them go through some of the struggles that they went through with their mom and me many years ago. So I think they're appreciating what Mom and I did for them, and it's really interesting to see some of the same themes coming up. But I'm eager to hear the questions of the people viewing the webinar and giving some practical strategies that may help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
So let me get started with some of the questions that we pre-prepared, and then we're going to jump into some of the viewer questions that we received. So maybe we can start by just talking a little bit about what are some of the reasons that kids struggle with homework?
It's a good question to start out with, Trinia. I think it's like a checklist you can think about. There may be some kids who sit down to do homework and who have an attitude that says, I can't do this. This is all new to me. This is scary to me. I don't want to do this. I'm not motivated to do this. And when kids sit down to any kind of task with that kind of mindset or attitude, their brain goes into escape mode, and they're really not looking to get into the work. They're looking to get out of the work. You may have kids at homework time who are tired because they spent the whole day at school. They started out early in the morning. They may not have eaten very well. They have been dealing with academic challenges, social challenges, organizational challenges, and now they sit down and they're asked to do yet more work. There are other kids who are resistant to homework because they just don't see a connection between the homework and their lives, or a connection between the homework and the things that went on during the school day that led up to this homework. They worry that if they do this homework, they might have to go to school tomorrow and share their results with someone else, and they may not be eager to be in front of a group to demonstrate perhaps what they think will be their failures. So there are a lot of reasons that get in the way of the homework. But the key to this whole presentation, this whole topic, is that unless kids get into a mindset that's more positive, they're going to be fighting you as parents, and they're going to be fighting the work, and they're not going to be learning, and the homework loses any value that it had. So it's really good to have this discussion to kind of get the scene set for success.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you brought up this mindset issue already. We actually received a question about mindsets from one of our parents in our community. And this parent was asking, how do you help change that mindset? If a kid has this negative outlook about homework, how do you get it to flip that switch so that they have a more positive mindset about doing homework?
It's a great question. If you think about us as adults doing something we haven't done before, or something that we might have done before, but we're facing it, we don't have a positive mindset, how that gets in the way, whether it's golfing or knitting or painting or whatever. The same question applies there. How do you get somebody who has a negative mindset into a positive mindset? A couple of things you do are as follows. One is that you talk about things that your child may have done in the past that are very much like this assignment, and anchor them in success or anchor them in competence. It may mean for a parent that you pull out a piece of paper that a child has done really well on in the past and say, well, the homework tonight is just like this or something like this. Do you remember how you felt when you finished this? And if you're lucky enough to have the kid say, yeah, I remember that wasn't that hard, but this is different, they'll say. So the parent might say, let's do the first one and see if you really think it's similar or different. So the idea of changing mindsets has to do with a lot with the perception that I'm going to do this well or I'm not going to do this well. This also talks about the need for coordination and communication with the teacher about this. If teachers know that the kids are sitting down and with a negative mindset about this, teachers can do a lot during the day to prime the pump for success, to even anticipate a negative mindset, so that when they give an assignment, they may say to a student, when you get home and open your folder to do this work, you have to think about what your brain is telling you about the work. You kids know that we've done a couple of these tasks, just like the ones that you're going to have tonight, and think about before you leave school how you feel about this task, because later on at homework time, you're going to have to remember that you were successful at this task, that you really did well before I sent you home with this task to do. So there are a lot of things that can be done to change a negative mindset. The best thing is to have an experience with success, because success breeds success. And once kids get something that they feel like they can do successfully, and they have the opportunity to do it, and then get feedback from their teachers, from their parents, that they in fact have done this well, that leads to more I can moments rather than more I cannot do this moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are some. And we're getting quite a few questions along these same lines. We have a question from Courtney who says, my daughter fights her knowledge on a subject and becomes very overwhelmed when doing homework. So it sounds like she has knowledge about this subject, but is kind of thinking that she doesn't for whatever reason. And so this parent's asking, is there a way to help her calm down so that she can think more clearly and feel more confident for the information that she actually does know?
Right. The fact that the parent knows that Courtney knows that her daughter knows this material is really important. So her daughter's in a state of anxiety that's shutting her down because she's got these kind of silent fears that she's not going to be successful. Perhaps parents can say to their kids, just sit down, don't look at your homework for a minute, but it's about the topic of whatever it is, the Civil War. Just tell me some things that you know about the Civil War right now, and get your kids kind of prime their pump for positive thinking. So if a kid says, well, I don't really want to talk about this now, a parent can say, you've got homework that has to deal with this, but something about the homework assignment is making you worried or anxious or shutting you down. You know, and I know that you know a lot about this. Let's just put the book away for a minute. Tell me a little bit about what you know about the Civil War, or whatever the subject might be. Once the child starts talking about that, the anxiety theoretically should go down, because she or he, the student, is now working from a position of competence. So once you get the student into that competent state, you can say to them, now, it's obvious that you know a lot about this. You want to try the first problem, the first item in the homework now. And the kid then starts to get anxious again. Then the parent can say, just think about what your body's telling you now. Your body, you know that you know the material, and your body's saying, I'm scared, I don't want to get into this. How do you talk to your mind and your body to get them in a different state? Because your mind is not telling you the truth right now. The truth is, you know this. Something about making the switch to the homework is making you change gears. Let's get back into it. Tell me more about the Civil War. Let's get back into that I can place, and then we'll move slowly into the I'm not sure if I can place, and let's bridge that gap. Mm-hmm. Or if it's an assignment and the kid has dysgraphia or difficulty handwriting, and the resistance is not due to the lack of knowledge or perceived lack of knowledge about the subject, the resistance is due to the fact that you're going to have to take that knowledge and turn it into handwriting and get it down on the paper so you can turn it in the next day. So a parent might say, just tell me the answer, I'll scribe for you. I'll write down your answer, at least on the first couple of problems. If your teacher requires that you write it, then you can copy my writing. But these are your words. I'm just being your recorder. And so you bypass the physical challenge that might be getting in the way, or the anticipation of difficulty that might be getting in the way, that has nothing to do with the content. Mm-hmm. If the homework requires a sentence answer and the child is good at sketching, you can say, well, sketch a drawing on the paper that shows that you know the content, and then I'll help you come up with a sentence to describe the drawing. Start with the child's strengths and move into the area of perceived weaknesses, and I think that can help prime the pump for success a lot better.
Oh, Jerry, there's so many good ideas. I'm not sure which ones to pull out and highlight. But I saw this a lot when I was a special ed teacher at the high school level. that a lot of kids just had trouble getting started. And some of it was this anxiety about whatever it is that they feel they're not that good at. And so even if they knew a lot about the subject matter, if they weren't sure, like they didn't want to write the essay or they didn't know how to put it into words, it became this barrier that made them not want to get started on an assignment. So like you mentioned, like checking in with the kid and just talking with them about whatever the subject matter is and getting started is really half the battle. And we had several parents that are asking about this getting started issue. And so I do want to know if you have any other suggestions or ideas for parents. We had a couple parents. So one parent was asking, how do I motivate my child to get homework started in order to finish quicker? He does just fine, but he complains so much about starting, it takes 3 times as long to complete. And then we had another parent saying, my child's first reaction when it's time to sit down for homework is to throw himself on the bed and refuse to do it. And it's not until I leave and say, forget it, and a lot of time passes when he finally comes around and says, okay, let's do it. So do you have any other ideas for how to get kids over that barrier? You already gave quite a few good ones, but any other words of advice?
Sure. One of the things I suggest to a lot of parents is you have your kids sit down and look at the task and say, do 2 things for me, son or daughter. I want you to rate what you think is the difficulty level of this task that your teacher has set before you. And use a 5-point rating scale. I've talked about this in other writing that I've done on Understood and spoken about in other places. Rate the difficulty of this. 5 means this is really a difficult task. 1 means this is easy and I think I can do it. And if the child says 5 all the time, I think it would behoove the parent to talk to the teacher to say, my kid is opening this homework assignment, and each time she does this, she's seeing that it looks like it's way too hard for her. Maybe you can use this number rating scale at school when you give out the assignments and ask kids to rate the difficulty level of the homework before they come home. That'll build a nice bridge between school and home. This doesn't take any time on the part of a teacher. And if kids get used to rating the difficulty level, it's going to be a survival skill for the rest of their life. The next question you ask them is, even if you think this is really hard, what do you think your ability to do this is? And here again, it's a 5-point scale. 1 means, I really think I can do this, or 5 means, there's no way I can do this. So if you've got a kid who's looking at work that she thinks is really difficult, and she doesn't believe she can do it, you've got to do something to change that formula. I'm typically looking for a 3-3 formula at least. The work is just hard enough, and I have just enough ability to do it. Theoretically, when a teacher sends homework home to do, it should be within the kid's competence level, and it should be within the kid's ability range. The more difficult challenges should show up during the school day, and they shouldn't present new, unbeatable challenges, if I use the term, at night. They should be things that flow naturally from the day. So for a child whose default setting is to run in the bed and say, I can't do this, there's something getting in the way. Partly it could be the dynamic. This kid and this parent may have learned to do this every night, and this smart mom says, I'm going to say, okay, forget it, walk out of the room, and then the kid gets started. So the idea is how you agree with your child to get into the homework. Say, okay, it's homework time, and how's it going to be? Are you going to go into it easily, or are we going to have that struggle we always have? And the kid will smile and say, we're going to have that struggle. And the mom would say, okay, let's have the struggle, but let's set a timer. We'll do the struggle because we always do this, but it's only going to last, we're going to only allow it to last for 2 minutes. When that's over, you get done with your homework, okay? You start with your homework. And if the kid smiles and says, okay, you know you're in a game situation, and you know the child understands this dynamic goes on and on, you want to shorten that time and ultimately eliminate that time that happens between. It may be a time that the parents will better use by saying, we're going to do homework, but before we do that, let me read you one of your favorite stories. Let me tell you something that happened today. Don't jump into the homework. It's like taking somebody next to a deep swimming pool filled with cold water and say, okay, it's swimming time. I'm going to push you in. And we're surprised, we wouldn't be surprised in that case if the kid resisted it. We say, let's go to the warm end of the pool and stick your feet in. Let's just get used to it a little bit, and then we'll deepen the water a little bit. There's some big resistance that's getting in the way, some dynamic that's getting in the way of homework. So you need to figure out what the source of that is and kind of work around that.
Mm-hmm.
Common scenario.
Absolutely. I love your idea about asking the kid to rate about how difficult this homework seems. And I think sometimes as adults, we overestimate what kids know and the little things that they might be getting hung up on. And I know that when I was teaching some of the kids, I would be surprised by them not understanding like something that I thought that they understood. And it might have just been like the directions. They thought we as adults sometimes write our directions a lot more complicated than they need to be. And as teachers, we're always working on that to make sure we're being clear. But sometimes directions aren't clear, and it can be as simple as talking it through with the kid to make sure they understand exactly what it is that they need to work on. But that's when those conversations between families and teachers can really be helpful on both sides so that teachers are getting that feedback of what kids are struggling with and if any modifications or changes need to be made to those assignments.
Right.
I also liked your point about wading into homework. And we had a question from a parent that was asking how to transition into homework and if it's okay to give them a break after school. And specifically, this parent's wondering, is it okay for them to sit down and watch TV for 30 to 60 minutes before getting started on homework? Or should they get started on homework right away? Or does it depend on the kid?
I do think it depends on the kids. Some kids like to come home, get their homework done, get it out of the way, so they know the rest of their evening is free for stuff like TV or games or whatever they're doing. I think it's a good thing to negotiate with kids to say, you know, you have to do your homework. We think that the homework will take 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it is. What do you think the best time for you to do the homework would be? And some kids who want to avoid it say, well, way later. I want to do it after dinner. And then you get into these struggles. Well, it's after dinner. It's 8 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock. And the kid is still struggling and he doesn't get it done, or she stays up all night long to get it done. That's a problem. You can't have that happen night after night after night. The next morning after an episode like that, or at a quiet time the next day, you have to say, how do you think homework and all that went last night? And the kid says, it was fine, I got it done. Yeah, but you were up until 3 o'clock in the morning and that's not acceptable. Let's try another approach tonight, because that can't happen. You can't be tired and expect to get your work done during the day. Some kids like to have a break or need a break. The struggle with that is you give kids a break and you say, well, you get to watch TV or do something for 30 minutes. It turns into just one more minute, or the game is not over, or just let me beat this enemy. And it turns into a 45 or 50-minute struggle. And that's not what you want either. So you might want to build in some reward systems. You say to a kid, look, you have a half-hour break time or debrief time, and then you're going to get into homework. Do you think it'll be easy for you to transition to a homework from your free time activity? No, Mom, I don't, says the kid. Well, let's see. Okay, I'm going to tell you when 30 minutes is up. You said you didn't think you'd have difficulty. Let's see what happens. And if there is difficulty, then debrief that. Talk about that. To say we don't need to struggle about these things at home. It's much nicer if we have pleasant relationships with each other. You have to do your homework. Let's not create scenarios where we have these struggles all the time. It's not fun for either of us. We don't feel good about that. But it does depend on the kid. And if there's a need for a break, sometimes it's a little homework, a little break, a little homework, a little break. That's the problem with that is little homework becomes no homework, and the kid is saying, I need to have a break. And then there starts to be a lot of what I might call manipulation. The kid is saying, oh, I need more time to relax. I'm so stressed. And some kids might be. But you have to work out a pattern that works for the parent and works for the kid. And it may not happen over 1 or 2 nights. It may take a while to develop this plan. And if the kid can't come up with a plan, a parent may have to suggest one, try it out, and then evaluate it the next day and say, how did that work? And the kid said, that was great. And the mom may say, didn't work for me because you just, for the first half hour of that work time, you were complaining and moaning and not getting into work. And I didn't feel good. And you said you didn't feel good. So let's change this a little bit. Let's make this work for us. So I think you have to individualize kids get used to doing it, and you don't get pushed by the kids' negativity back into throwing up your hands or getting exasperated. Once you get into a pattern for homework, it becomes expected, and you can just look at your child and say, you know what I'm talking about. This is homework time. This is not free time. Get to work. I'm not going to be in here. I'll come back in 30 minutes and check on you, or I'll come back in 5 minutes and check on you and see if you're on task, because this is part of your job. Mm-hmm. And part of my job is making sure you get your job done.
Absolutely. Yeah, so much of what we do is just setting up routines and habits for ourselves to make these things easier. And so working with your kid to set up some sort of schedule and have your kid be involved in making that schedule can really help to eliminate some of these homework battles.
Yeah, good point.
Jerry, we have a couple of questions also about keeping kids focused on homework. So they've sat down, they've gotten started, but they're having trouble staying focused. One parent was asking about an 11-year-old who's having trouble staying focused. And another parent was asking about a 7th grader who begins assignments, but the parent has to stand over them and explain it step by step. And apparently if they walk away, nothing's getting done. So do you have any tips for keeping kids going on their homework without parents having to sit right there with them?
Yeah. Well, I think probably most teachers send homework home that should not, by design, require the intensive intervention of a parent helping a child do something step by step. I think that's something to check out. Parents ought to ask teachers whether that's their expectation. If it's not their expectation, then teachers have an opportunity to talk to kids about the homework and how much help you, child, will need when you go home. For example, do you think this homework is going to require your mom or dad sitting with you the whole time to help you do it, or is it something you think you can do independently? And for a teacher to find that out before she sends the assignment home is an activity that will be much appreciated by parents, who can then have this dialogue about it. But if the child is saying, I can't do this without you, or I'll do one and then I need you to help me do the other one, it may be a symptom that anxiety is getting in the way. And if that's a problem, then we need to deal with the anxiety.
Mm-hmm. We have a couple of questions from parents asking about kids who forget about their homework assignments or don't seem to know when they have assignments at all. So do you have tips for how families can help their kids stay on top of knowing what assignments they have that they should be working on? And then also a parent was asking about their kid not remembering to turn in the homework. So they've done it, but they didn't turn it in.
Yeah. I think most schools have some kind of system to have kids record their homework. In some cases, though, if it's at the end of a school day and a teacher is busy and it's been a really active day and the teacher writes the homework on the board, the kid may not copy it down from the board. Some teachers write homework in a different color ink or a different color chalk on the whiteboard so that kids know that that's homework, so that's color-coded. That's more typical of kids, but not necessarily. I've seen that work very effectively in high school, where kids are struggling to make sure they get the homework assignment copied from the board. A lot of schools have electronic homework reminders, websites where kids can go and check the teacher's homework at the end of the day, and parents can go in and check it. So there's no reason not to know what's going on. I think having kids call a study partner or a classmate who's pretty good at remembering the homework assignment and doing that as a part of their nighttime ritual if they have to, that can be helpful too. For a kid to come home and say, I don't remember my homework, there's got to be some kind of memory-enhancing devices to help with that. A place to write it, a way to write it down. If writing it down, if it takes too long for the child to write the homework assignment down at the end of a class period or at the end of a day because slow handwriting or difficulty with visual perception, copying from the board, and those kinds of things that may be common in kids with learning challenges, then teachers often give the homework assignment in another form, on a piece of paper that the kids can take home with them, or a handout that's at the directions are at the top of a worksheet. The idea of forgetting about it, I think, needs to be addressed by mechanical means, record-keeping devices and things like that. Most kids have cell phones to figure out to get an app that allows them to put their homework on the app before they leave school. That makes it an easy thing to remember. But the low-tech solution is calling a buddy in your class that's prearranged and say, I forget the homework, what's going on? And that can be very helpful. Mm-hmm. For a child, what's the other part? You said a parent was talking about getting the homework done and then
Forgetting
not
to turn
remembering
it
to
in.
bring it in.
Yeah.
Well, if it's done and it's tangible, I would put it next to a table next to the door on the way out, or put it next to the kid's underwear when he's getting dressed in the morning, because you want him to have it, or put it in the backpack as soon as it's done. Often kids take things, they shove them in their backpack, and it becomes the big black hole, and it gets lost, but it's really in there. It's a shame for a kid to do all this hard work and not come to school with the assignment and not get the credit for doing it. So I think mechanically you have to say, we finished with your homework. Where are we going to put it so you're virtually guaranteed of not forgetting it tomorrow? Tape it to the door that the child exits by, and shove it into the kid's hand. Put it in the kid's lunchbox. Put it in the kid's book bag, backpack if you have to as a parent yourself. That's an unfortunate. Pin it to the inside of a child's sweater. Do something creative and get that homework in there. And then say to the kid when he gets home the next day, did you remember to give the homework to your teacher? What did she say? How did that feel? Wasn't that great? Was it a good strategy? Debrief about these strategies, so it's not something the parent is always telling the kid to do. It's something the kid knows the answer to when the parent says, what are you going to do with your homework now to make sure you don't forget it tomorrow? That has to become the kid's responsibility, like a job later in life. It's good training.
Absolutely. And I know when I was teaching, our kids with ADHD or attention and focus issues had trouble with this area, and it really was about creating those systems that you were talking about, of making sure that it's in the backpack, maybe in folders, like if you have specific folders for each class. I don't know what age this child is, that can help them remember if they have that folder in that class, then they can turn it in. And then, like you said, Jerry, checking in with them after they come home from school and asking, did you get it turned in? And maybe setting up some sort of reward for if they were able to remember. But I know for some kids who had ADHD, if they were on a 504 plan, or if they had an IEP for special education services, you might even be able to get the teacher to remind that child during class. To check in with them, remind them to turn it in, because it might just take them longer to establish that routine and get in that system. And if somebody in that classroom can help remind them, then that can help them establish that habit.
Right. And a teacher can say also, getting the homework done is one thing, bringing it is another. Those are two different kinds of challenges. Mm-hmm. You're great at getting it done, but you're not so great at getting it in. So let's increase the reinforcement here. If you get it done and get it in, you get full credit for whatever I think the homework deserves. If you get it done and your parent verifies that you get it done, but you bring it in a day later, you'll still get credit, but you might lose a point because that's not helping you get it in on time. So some incentive program might help. You don't want to penalize a child and have him not want to turn it in, especially a kid who's a perfectionist and really likes to do everything well. You want to reinforce the positive behavior rather than to punish the negative behavior.
Mm-hmm. We who was saying just that the quantity of homework her child is receiving, or her or his, I'm not sure on this parent, but that it seems overwhelming, that there's too much homework. They say every time I think we are nearly caught up with one math packet, I discover another one. And they're trying to chunk in brain breaks and not overwhelm their child, but it just seems like too much. Do you have any recommendations for this parent?
If the parent is going to a parent-teacher night or having a conference with the teacher, I think it's important to ask the teacher what the expectation of the school is for how long homework should take and how much homework a child should have. In the elementary grades, it's a lot easy to coordinate that because the child typically has one, maybe two teachers who are giving homework. As you move up into the middle grades, you have kids who are going to 3 or 4 or more teachers who may be giving assignments each night. If they are coordinating their work, and middle schools tend to work nicely around this in many cases where they have teams, they say, look, I'm giving a lot of homework assignment for the American History unit. What are you giving? I want to make sure we don't overwhelm these kids. But if they're not coordinating their message and kids are going home with just way too much homework, according to anybody's standards, the school needs to know about that. But it's the question is, what is your expectation about how much homework and how much time it should take? Because my kid is getting 5 packets of homework, and each one is taking 45 minutes, and that takes a total of whatever that math ends up to be. And if that's what your expectation is, I'm going to have to help my child. If everybody's doing that, and that's what your expectation is, I'm going to have to help my child figure out how to get that done. But he or she is really overwhelmed. I want to make sure that the expectations are realistic. And the other thing that can happen is if your child is totally overwhelmed with homework, you might set up a situation where you and the teacher agree to give the child some kind of pass, a one-time homework pass per grading period, where if it's just too overwhelming and the child is freaking out about something and crying and being really, really upset about it, the parent can pull out this pass and say, you know your teacher has approved one of these for every kid in your class. You can use yours now. If it's the 10th of the month, you won't be able to use it again until the next month starts. But people understand that kids have lives outside of school and they get busy and there's a lot of homework, and there may be a time when you need that kind of a break, a kind of a mental health break from homework. So know that you won't be penalized. Let's use this wisely, but it's an escape valve. That's been helpful for a lot of kids, especially those who get anxious and who like to be perfect about their work. I hope that's helpful.
I love those ideas. We had a couple parents asking about long-term projects and how to help kids plan out how they're going to tackle this big project that maybe it's a week long, or in the older grades, maybe it's a whole semester or 9-week period, and how to help them chunk it out. So do you have any advice for how to develop a study plan and break these big assignments into smaller chunks?
Yeah, I wrote this in the context of the fact that most elementary schools, when they work with kids, try to teach them about organizational strategies in addition to the content, delivering the content or mastering the content, so that theoretically by the time the kids get into middle school or middle school, 7th or 8th grade, they're supposed to be working pretty independently, and that involves setting up their own schedules, their own timelines. And then when they get into high school, the expectation is kids are pretty good at this and they don't have difficulty. A lot of kids with organizational problems early on don't master this skill, so they need extended training and tutoring in this skill through middle school and through high school. Sometimes in college they have difficulty with this, so it's important to realize that. I think the idea of breaking the assignment into milestones, let's say taking a long-term project, looking at how long the child has to do the project, whether it's a week or 2 or a month, and then breaking down the tasks so that the child knows what he or she has to do within the first week, and then doing a timeline check at that point, seeing if the child's on target. If you pass that milestone and the work hasn't been done, the child's going to feel overwhelmed, which is going to get in the way of his or her ability to organize his work. The executive functioning skills go awry when that kind of pressure is on, and the kid is going to be behind the 8 ball, and the month-long project, which should be doable, becomes a miserable task. So breaking the project down into these milestones, checking in, and for some kids you might have to do it a day at a time. You have to say, look, what do you expect to get done on Tuesday? And then I'm going to check with you on Wednesday to see if you got that done. We're also going to look at the impediments to that. If you didn't reach your Tuesday goal or your weekend goal, what got in the way? Oh, too many assignments, sports, whatever it might be, music lessons, concerts, whatever it might be. And what helped you get on task if you've been successful? And let's keep the helpers going, and let's minimize the hurdles going forward. Don't wait for this thing to get delayed, because then a child is struggling to catch up and keep up, and learning is not very efficient when that's happening. And again, parents should engage with teachers, or have their older kids engage with their teachers to share the strategy that the child and the parents have created to help keep this kid on task, so that even if the kid is struggling with these deadlines, a teacher knows the child is trying earnestly to get this work done on time, and maybe struggling with the method they're using, but that's a lot different from a kid who just falls behind and stops working, and the teacher throws up her hands or his hands in exasperation and say, you ought to know how to do this by now. Let the child be his or her own PR agent with the teacher saying, Mr. Smith, I got to tell you, this is going to be hard for me, but my dad and I worked out a way to break this into parts, and we're going to try to get this much done this week, and I'm really happy with that idea, and maybe on Friday I'm going to show you what I've achieved, because I need every cheerleader I can get, because this stuff is really hard for me. The content is pretty easy, but organization just kills me, so I want to let you know how hard this is for me, and maybe you'll pat me in the back once in a while.
Mm-hmm. unfortunately running out of time, but I do want to squeeze in. I've got two more questions I'm hoping to
Sure.
squeeze in. So one of the questions was about a child who takes medication for ADHD, which apparently works during the day, but then they come home and they've got that rebound effect where the medication is not working and they're having trouble focusing on the homework. Do you have any recommendations for this parent?
Yeah, some parents who find themselves in this situation talk to their pediatrician or whoever is prescribing the medication, and they have to. That person has to know that this is happening. In some cases, it's a matter of extending the range of the medication so the beneficial effects continue through at least into the homework time, without over medicating the child or getting into a sleep cycle or having negative effects. But if the medication works during the day, homework is a time where school really is continued. So the effects of the ADHD are getting in the way and becoming impediments to getting the homework done. If medication was helpful during the AM, it might be helpful during the PM, but that's a delicate balance. I'm not a physician and I can't make a specific recommendation about that, but that's a discussion that ought to take place with the prescribing physician. If it's a chronic problem and you don't want to medicate the child during those hours, you need to have a discussion with the teacher to say, look, he's got a legitimate diagnosis. The medication helps during the day, but we have, for a lot of reasons, do not want to extend the medication. Let's think about either not cutting out the homework, but letting my child do enough examples for you at night that shows that she understands the concept sufficiently well. That will level the playing field for her a little bit. She'll be able to demonstrate competence and she'll be more successful with homework than would be the case otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Those are great. Okay, so the last question that I think we can squeeze in is this parent has a high school age child who's having trouble taking notes during class. And this is making it so that when they come home to do homework, they're not able to do the homework because they haven't taken the notes during class and they're not able to refer to those. Do you have recommendations for this parent?
Yes, I do. Taking notes is problematic for some kids on a couple of levels. One is that their hand doesn't work as fast as their brain needs to process. Two, that they're copying things from the whiteboard or the projector onto a piece of paper, and every time they look up and back and forth, they get disorganized and they can't do that. In many cases, they're really good at listening to what the teacher's saying, but as soon as they start to write, it affects their ability to listen and comprehend well because it's breaking their attention cycle at that point. Teachers who understand this, especially for kids who have 504 plans or IEPs, characteristically give the notes to students in their class, or at least an outline of the notes to help them organize their work when they're writing it down. Other kids get to use note buddies or scribes, another person in class who's really good at note taking, who finds it helpful just to simply make a copy on the Xerox machine or the photocopy machine at the end of the day and give it to that student. If teachers perceive that as copying out, or if the student herself perceives that as copying out, there needs to be some education around that. You want the kid to do the material. If note taking is getting in the way of the material, then note taking is the problem. It doesn't mean that the student is stupid. You can get better at note taking, but I'd rather see a student turn on a tape recorder in class and take the tape recorder home and listen to that again. People think that's a simple solution, and some teachers don't feel comfortable with a tape recorder in their class, but that kid who is allowed to use that accommodation goes home, listens to it again. That child is doing twice the work that other kids are doing in order to get that information back into his or her head. So I'd rather see a teacher equip a student with an outline or even the basic facts of the lecture or the presentation so that the child only needs to embellish those facts, that the superstructure for it is there in advance. When I do a presentation to adults for in-service training, I give a handout with a copy of the slide and 5 blank spaces next to each slide so that the participant, can write a note. Sometimes I put 5 major features on the slide so that when the participant goes home, they say, oh, I remember what this guy was talking about, and I wrote a question right next to that. I mean, that's not cheating. That's helping people learn in a very efficient way. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. So it comes back to working with the team to see what supports need to be put in place. If we want the kid to understand this knowledge that they're getting out of class, it's not really about the note taking, although working on those skills can be helpful. but we need to make sure that the kid has those accommodations or supports that they need to be able to access this information, especially if they're on an IEP plan or 504. It's really important to make sure that those are in place. Jerry, unfortunately, we are out of time, but we got through so many questions and there was so much great information. Thanks so much for being here.
Always a pleasure to have these discussions. I hope my comments have been helpful and look forward to doing this again.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of our viewers. If you want to see our upcoming chats, you can go to u.org/calendar. And if you have more questions on this topic, you can check out our community where there's lots of families that pipe in with answers, and also our experts jump in sometimes. You can find that at u.org/community. Thanks so much for joining us.